So thank you again. Let we have the next presentation for the improving data homogeneity across the country. So you're welcome.
Hello, my name is Claire. I'm here with Kapai, and there are two other mappers from OSM DRC that are here. But I was asked to be presenting the few slides we have. The idea was to generate a little bit of a conversation as well. Here we only have a fixed mic, but after those few slides, you'll be invited to come in the front if you want to share any experience as well. Thank you. I'm part of OpenStreetMap DRC community. So I live in Kinshasa, the capital city of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is like the biggest country in Central Africa. And we are facing a few challenges in terms of data homogeneity in general in OpenStreetMap. And I'll share a few things about this. But first, about the community. I might be the most representative person of the Congolese community, but so here are a few pictures from a Butembo OSM conference that happened there in 2022, and activities we did with children, other mapping activities that happened in southeastern DRC. We actually have lots of local groups that are trying to improve and actually improving the map around them and taking the opportunity to use those data in their own cities. So OSM DRC community kind of officially started around 11 years ago. The country is big, and it's not easy to travel from one side to the other one. And so we had to create lots of local groups and help growing leaders in their own cities, so that they could invite students and get them discover OpenStreetMap and use OpenStreetMap data, identify the needs, and so on. But therefore, because it's kind of very difficult to all meet in one place, because there are no roads that would allow everyone to meet in one city, for instance. So we need to fly or to take boats and so on. And so we do lots of things online, and we had to coordinate around some standards. And we also, across these years, we built some community resources to help each others share their experience and to access the data. And among those resources, there's an HDX account. So for those that are maybe in the humanitarian sector or regularly downloading data, you probably know about that HDX website that allows people to download data. In our case, we usually publish national or provincial datasets there. We also have a YouTube account which helps that helps sharing the videos that have been recorded during trainings, and so that they can be used by other groups. There are a number of videos on the basic usage of QGIS and on some OpenStreetMap applications in French, most of them. And then a big thing on which we worked for several years were some tagging conventions that are nationalized. And so based on different interests and opportunities, a number of tagging conventions were like developed, especially like for like health structures, for instance, and that helped like categorizing and identifying those amenities in the country. So regarding the HDX website, so that's you have the URL there if you are curious to see how it looks like. You might wonder why we don't just use GeoFabric. I mean, we actually also use GeoFabric, but GeoFabric export for DRC is more than 1 gigabyte, and 1 gigabyte is not something that everyone can afford to download. And then it doesn't include some very specific like tagging that we might need as well. And that's why we are providing those specific data sets on this website that are fitting better the needs. And therefore, like for instance, the first one here is the national road data sets. And that one has been downloaded more than 1,000 times. We have a number of other data sets that have been downloaded 2,000, 3,000 or more times. So I guess that this confirms the need for those data sets. And so those data are usually exported manually. They are checked, and after checking, we push them on HDX. And when we do the check, it's where we usually realize that a relation has been broken, or there's a gap there, and there's some editing needed. And so that also helps doing some regular check and cleaning in the data. This is an example of the health conventions that were set up for the health structures in the DRC. And so there's a whole page that describes like health offices and health structures and how they are supposed to be registered, like tagged. Some of the tags are like common ones. Some have been developed and added to OSM. There's, for instance, some health boundary tagging as well, because like health divisions in the DRC are different from administrative divisions, and it's sometimes very important to have them to have an idea of the catchment of some health structures. And so as this is an important information in the country, it's also been added to OSM. So once we identified gaps in the data, we try to fill them in. So there are a number of contributors that use mobile apps, OSM Tracker, OSM Ant, Street Complete. Nowadays, there are more and more users of Everydoors as well, and organic maps. Vespucci sometimes, a little bit. But then the tags have mostly been addressed using tasking manager projects, because they help, like, they allow collaborative digitization, and when there are like important infrastructures missing, like roads or more, that's very effective. But the country is very big, and like we realize that there have already been more than 120,000 tasks that have been mapped through the tasking manager in the DRC, and we are still far from like having covered the country. And tasking manager projects are limited in area, which means that we cannot like do big tasks to cover areas like for specific data sets. And so we try to adapt a little bit to those constraints. One option is to also use external data sets. So in the DRC, we don't have many like official data sets that would be public and easily accessible. But there are some organizations that are sharing their data, sometimes not under the ODBL licenses, but we can like negotiate, discuss, and like for instance, some time ago we had like a grid tree that works in a number of countries in the continent that granted us permission to use and import some of the data in some provinces in the country. But there are also some older data sets that are published under ODBL. The issue with those data sets is that sometimes they are kind of old and maybe they may look inaccurate compared to the level of the resolution that is now accessible and feasible in OpenStreetMap. And so importing this data isn't always the solution, even if it would be possible in terms of licensing and there could be discussions in the community. But like, for instance, waterways. We have a number of major waterways that are still missing in the country. And I mean, we have like thousands of waterways. And so for those data, we had like a former data set from maybe former colonial maps that were drawn at the time. And the resolution and the accuracy didn't allow for an import. But so we built a number of tasking manager projects on which we applied, like using QGIS, we applied a buffer based on those former data sets. And then we imported this in the tasking manager as like the shape of the tasks. And so the users know that within each of those like snake shape, they're supposed to be a major waterway. And so they can check with the imagery and with maybe Open Topomap as well, what's the direction of it, and if it's visible or not. And so this proved to be quite effective in improving and filling gaps based on like former data set that couldn't be really used as they were. And so this is basically the thing we wanted to share and listen and exchange on, maybe like what are the solutions that you've been considering or identifying or experimenting on in your own countries. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think if there is anyone who have anything to share with how, or any question to ask, how, you are welcome. Let's see if there is anyone who have a question or any concern. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much for what you shared. My question is about the HDX account, because I'm pretty sure that whenever you put data in HDX, few years ago, a few months ago, it may change and it may need to be like updated. So do you come back a few times later and update the same data, or and how often do you update those data, or for the time being you just put it there and then it stays the way it is?
Thank you. So when you publish data on HDX, you can also specify the expected frequency of updates. And so you can say that it's an one and only like drop. But usually we say that it's like, for instance, an like annual update, or like a trimestral, or I mean, it depends. In some specific times, like for instance, 3 years ago, we had a volcanic eruption, and so OpenStreetMap DRC started like publishing data sets that were very specific to the area around where the eruption had happened. And there we were doing basically like daily updates. And so every day or few days, we were publishing like new data of the same data sets, but updated versions. And so here, for instance, the national data sets, national road data sets, I mean, we have 44 national roads, and they are not like changing every day, you know? And so this data set could stay there for a few years. This would probably be fine. We are also exchanging with like staff from national institutions that sometimes send us feedback, because when they have all the OSM road data, sometimes it's not very easy to catch errors. But when there's specifically this network, they can easily see, hey, there's been a change, or we are doing works on that side. And so if we get feedback, then we prepare and build an update and we publish it. So yeah. It's at some point we were using some script, but we would need to update them and see, because the last few uploads were completely manual. And so it also takes a little bit of time from volunteers to prepare them, but it's usually worth it. So, thank you. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the scalability of this voluntary work. How many people are involved? And I mean, what are the things you think you're able as within the community to do, and things that maybe are a bit beyond, I mean, the time you can dedicate to that, because it's I mean, it would be too time consuming.
Thank you. There are a few hundred volunteers that are really more or less regularly active. On the HGX export side, we are maybe 2, 3, like contributing to like this feedback, checking, publishing. So that's not a lot, but I mean, we don't do updates so regularly, so it's still kind of okay. But for instance, in terms of the data gaps that we've been identifying the last few years, we have identified tasks to cover like the next 100 years if we stay at the same level of contribution. So at the same time, we are trying to grow the community and have more like human resources to contribute, but it's also a time issue, like availability of each of those contributors. So we could certainly do more. There were years where we covered more gaps than some others, because we had some like resources to cover internet for contributors and places with power. And so this has immediate effect on the level of the contributions. So, I mean, yeah, we could do more with more.
Thank you. Is there anyone who have a question? Yes, you may come. Welcome.
I don't know if this is a sort of horrible question to ask. First of all, I did love your talk. I should say that first. Given that there is so much space to cover and there's so much detail and like the labor involved, are you thinking about using artificial intelligence? Or are you not? And I'm sorry if that's an offensive question.
No. I mean, if we are not, thinking about it, others will do it without us. So we've already done a few projects that involved artificial intelligence. So in 2020 to 2021, we imported through a very detailed process, I think more than 2 million buildings in Eastern DRC. That's still a very little part of the buildings that are needed. I personally don't think it's the most sustainable way to do it. I know there are other sessions about like open AI being used in like updating, and I'd be curious for us to try it in the DRC as well. there were a number of challenges that were faced with that. It's nice to have like millions or dozens of millions buildings footprints that are already like cleaned and there, but we had lots of issues with shifts because we were working in hilly areas, and basically every footprint needed to be shifted to its actual position. Then they were extracted from satellite imagery, which wasn't available to the other contributors, which means that then you arrange everything and then someone else will like try to shift everything again because the reference image isn't publicly available. And so, I mean, I actually consider that in the DRC we have many more features that are much more necessary and useful than building footprints. Unless we are maybe in a city center, there are specific like, buildings that are used as references, then of course it's useful. But when you are in villages, it's not that much the case. And then those buildings are often built in like non-sustainable, like materials that needs to be, that requires rebuilding the buildings every 5 years, for instance, and the new building isn't always rebuilt at the exact same place, which means that when you are like importing buildings based on an imagery which is maybe 3 or more years old, you are probably importing buildings that have moved since then. And so, I think we have lots of other things to work on until we find a better solution. Yeah.
Welcome.
I can proceed. Okay. Thank you very much for the great work you're doing. My question is simple. According to this project, since you looked at manual digitizing to be the most effective way, and then you create projects on hot tasking manager, so is it the only way you're doing the work? And also, these projects on the tasking manager available to each and everyone, or there is a specific community that you talked about that is mapping them? Beginner mappers also are allowed to map, or they're basically for advanced mappers?
So we don't only use the tasking manager, but we found that when we had groups of like 20 or more contributors that wanted to work together to reach some objectives, it was one of the most efficient tool to actually have everyone together. There are alternatives. But it's one tool that is often known by already a lot of contributors, so that's often easier to use that one. And then most of our projects are not open to beginner contributors, that are open to intermediate or higher levels. And depending on the projects, like for instance, when it was building imports, then it was restricted to some groups of users that had gone through some training, because like following import guidelines isn't always highly intuitive. And so it really required some training to make sure that the contributor was following them correctly. And so then we were filtering users through those. There are lots of settings that can be used on the tasking manager to allow some groups of users to contribute and some others not. So yeah, that's what we use. And then the validation aspect of the tasking manager is also helping with the quality. We can make sure that whoever has mapped, even if it's not someone from the local community, but we can cross-check if they followed the explanations that were in the description. Because sometimes it's easy to jump on the project and think you know what is expected, and then it was a bit different. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Claire. So that OpenStreetMap is a free project, and so in your presentation that you make a convention about tags. So that I don't know, how do you ensure that people, the foreign mappers, take care of the instruction in mapping convention and use it for mapping in the DRC? How do you do?
Yeah, thank you. That can be a challenge, as there are many people that are contributing in the DRC. We are we appreciate very much the different contributions, but it's also, I mean, it's mostly like remote, like armchair mapping from Mapatons, and this is done mainly to digitize objects, which means that like remote contributors rarely touch the actual attributes, apart from the very basic ones. But our national conventions are not contradicting the basic guidelines. So the national tagging is more specific to like that type of L structure and so on. And so this usually isn't really a problem. And for roads, we are using the general like Africa Highway tagging scheme as well. So if we find people that don't follow this, we just like send a message as feedback and suggest corrections. But usually it's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Last question.
Okay, wait.
This is not a question, but a proposition. We know that in our country we are not directly responsible on the data people are producing. We are active in OpenStreetMap communities, but people in America can create data on everywhere in our country. So that how can we ensure that to have like Sentinel, like people who get directly alerts when people create bad data in OpenStreetMap? It can be a way to ensure that people like me, like you, like everywhere here, have the direct alerts in your WhatsApp or in your, how can I say, in your box, that these things, people create data here, but is not respects the role of mapping in OpenStreetMap, you know. Like, not only to go to Mapulate or the Osmos or things like that, but directly you receive a message, so that if you can work on it, I think we can have OSM ambassador, OSM sentinels who can work directly on this type of problem, so that we can stop problem at the alors commencement, je pense. Je vais m'arrêter là. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. There are actually tools that exist that help doing so, but then it's true that like doing regular exports of some specific data layers helps also detecting issues. I work a lot on relations, and if someone breaks a relation, that usually impacts a number of things. I'm receiving mail updates, like email notifications, each time that someone modify the country boundary, for instance. I set up an alert system, and that sends me an email each time. Sometimes it's totally fine. Someone just split a segment because they added something, and it makes sense to have split that segment. But if someone broke something down, I also get a notification. So the more objects you set up in the alert system, the more notification you'll have. So it's a bit like, how do you share the work with others? But there are tools. We could maybe plan something like a discussion online with the community in French to discuss about those specific tools. Yeah. Thank you for the idea.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation.